Hey everybody! So two things before we start. One, you're seeing a different angle of my room, and that's because the natural lighting in my area is pretty much non-existent. So it's usually gray or cloudy or really disgusting and rainy outside, and then in the winter always snowing. So I usually sit by a window and that light hits me, but today I'm not because it's one of those gross days, so I've got my lamp, and that's what's illuminating the video right now. And then the second thing is with holidays and many birthdays in my family coming up from now until New Year's Day, I will be busy, we'll be traveling, and there will be visitors and everything, preparation, lots of things going on, so I'm going to try to film videos ahead of time. So, I recently had a conversation with Life of M for her YouTube channel. She interviewed me about languages, and the one thing that really stuck out to me in that conversation was the fact that there are so many misconceptions by people outside of the language community about languages. And, of course, that would make sense that they're outside of that community. But they're seeking people and resources that are not accurate. They don't really know where to go or who to go to because they're kind of trying this out for the first time. So it's kind of hit or miss. And so there are many misconceptions, but I wanted to talk about 5 common ones in particular. The first one being that if you know a language, you know everything about it. And I know that's why people have a problem with calling someone a polyglot, because then they go, oh, well, this person hardly speaks this language, so, they don't actually know it. And there's like fine lines between all of this, so I'm not even going to get into that, but what I'm going to say is just because I'm conversational or fluent in Spanish or French or whatever does not mean that I know every word of that language. I started a job recently that is the exciting, if you watched my language rut video, that is the exciting opportunity that I have to use my languages in a meaningful way is through work. And at this job, it's in an industry that I am not at all familiar with, neither were many of the people going into that industry either. They didn't have a background in it and they had to learn about it. But in my case, people will hand me something and say, can you translate this for me? And the truth is, I have to learn what it is in English first. Then, once I understand what that even means in English, I can't just learn a term and use it. I have to understand what it means. Then I have to find the identical terminology in Spanish and sometimes even French. And it could differ between languages, and one word could mean something in English, but it means something else in another language. So, no, someone who speaks another language does not know everything in that language. There are different domains, and they might not know about that, but they may be able to talk about their lives pretty easily. So, that's the first myth. The second one is that if you know a language, or 2 or 3, you know them all. And oh, how I wish that was true, because I love languages, and I would love to be able to speak them all, but no. And the reason why this is even coming up in this video is because it has happened to interpreters. It's happened to my professor, and it's happened to my mom from completely 2 different places in the United States. They both speak English and Spanish, and they would be called to interpret for languages that they didn't know because people knew that they were interpreters. My mom was called to do Vietnamese, I believe, and she doesn't know any, and it's nothing like Spanish or English as far as I know. And then my professor, I'm not really sure what language he was called to do, but it was very different from any Romance language. So that's another thing. We don't speak every language. We may speak a couple or even a few, but we don't speak them all. Then, the third thing is that Rosetta Stone or Duolingo is going to make you fluent in a language. And this is hilarious because I don't know that these products claim to make you fluent. I don't think they do, and I don't think they can. But people will say, oh, I learned this language by using Rosetta Stone. I can speak Chinese because I used Rosetta Stone. And of course, those are people who are endorsing the product. But let me give you an example from a movie. So I watch the Hallmark Channel. I love cheesy romance movies. And one movie that I was watching, there was this father and daughter who knew French. And then this woman came in, the main character, and she heard their conversation, and towards the end of the movie, she actually interjected in French, and they go, "Wow, you learned French? Did you take a class?" And she goes, "No, I learned from Rosetta Stone." And if that isn't a blatantly obvious advertisement, then I don't know what is. But she basically said that she knew French, and this wasn't something like, "Can I please have a hamburger?" No, this was actual conversational French. And maybe you haven't used Rosetta Stone before, maybe you haven't used Duolingo before, but they make good supplements. And if you're just learning for fun, then that would be an expensive investment in Rosetta Stone. But if you're learning for fun, then okay, no worries. Learn those phrases, those common phrases and things. But if you're serious about learning, then you need more than one resource, and you also need to be learning more than just certain phrases that are pretty simple, like "Hi, how are you?" and they're repeated over and over again. So that's another thing, because I know people will tell me, and I love Duolingo, and I do think Rosetta Stone has good qualities to it, so please don't take this the wrong way. I do love Duolingo, but I did do a challenge where I tried to learn Polish in 90 days with minimal grammar explanation because the notes weren't updated. And at the end of that, I didn't speak well at all. I mean, I was able to say things and try to piece things together, but I didn't speak well. My grammar was not good, and I basically knew a lot of vocabulary and just kind of tried to do my Tarzan talk, as Benny Lewis would say. And it didn't really do much, but people will say to me, "Oh yeah, I'm using Duolingo to learn Spanish," and I'm like, "That's great." But if they're like serious about it, then you should combine it with something else. So then the fourth thing is that adults and children, the whole children learn much easier than adults, that's controversial, and I don't really want to get into it too much, but people have made videos on the flip side of that, that adults actually have it easier than children. Now, I think both situations are different, so I'm not really sure how you can compare them, because children will pick up a language, whereas adults have to study. But what I do want to say out of this is that it can be done. It reminds me of losing weight. There are adults who will say to younger people, "Well, you can lose weight quickly, or you're thin because you have a faster metabolism, or because you're younger." Well, they'll specifically say you're younger and your metabolism is faster, or you're able to lose it quicker. And there are adults who lose weight. There are adults who get into great shape. Even older adults, like elderly people, who are able to get into shape and be very fit. So if they can do that, I think it applies to languages as well. There are older adults and like regular adults and elderly people who learn languages. And just because you're not a kid doesn't mean you can't learn it. It just means you have to be disciplined, just like you'd have to be disciplined in exercising and eating healthy. So it can be done, and if you're saying that it can't because you're not young, then I think that's an excuse, and I know there are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I think a lot of people, the majority of people, should be able to learn just fine. And then the last myth is that you need to go abroad to study, or not to study, but to be fluent in the language. I have heard that so many times. It comes from people who will read one paper that scientifically says that immersion is the best method, which, yes, that is true. Immersion is wonderful, and that's what helps. But your immersion does not have to come from being in a foreign country. So people will be very controversial with this topic. Everyone has their own opinions. But in my opinion, I was able to get conversational by immersing myself locally. In the case of Spanish, I had people near me who spoke Spanish. With French, I had to go looking for those people. But I spoke with them often, and I changed everything. I would watch shows in French. I changed all my social media and everything into French. I would write in French. I immersed myself as much as possible, and it helped a lot. Now, going abroad has great benefits, like actually having the cultural aspect of the language and culture and all of that. So there is that, which is fantastic. But I don't know. I would say, yeah, okay, maybe if you want to be perfect, which I don't even think that's a thing, but if you want to be extremely, like, super high level, then yeah, people will argue to go abroad. But if you want to be conversationally fluent and talk about your day, then just immerse yourself from where you are. And there are people who have shown that you can do that without being in that country. So, don't use that as an excuse. Once again, it's an excuse. People will use these facts that they hear as an excuse to not learn. And so I thought for that reason that it was important to do this video because people will say things like, yeah, Rosetta Stone's very good. And they haven't even tried it yet. Or they haven't seen someone try it who is actually serious about studying languages. Maybe their friend tried Rosetta Stone. Or they'll say, Immersion's the best method because they read about it online somewhere. Or they'll say that, I don't know, what's the other one? Oh, like, this person speaks every language in the world because they know one or whatever. These things are just not true, and I'm sure there's more out there that I missed, and if I did, and you know them, please leave them in the comments below. And if you know people who are interested in languages but they tell you these things, then share this video with them and share with them videos of actual people who study languages in daily life. I don't want to say just polyglots because I think people have good advice to offer who maybe are just bilingual or trilingual and may not be a polyglot yet, but people have great things to offer within this community, and I feel like this community, in order to grow more, we need to be introduced to people who are kind of interested in learning languages, because somehow these videos of facts that aren't true, or whatever it is, or I read this online, or I heard this from so-and-so, somehow that's more popular than the actual niche of the language community. So let's get ourselves out there and help people be encouraged to learn languages because they can. And things don't have to be the way that they hear, which is pretty negative, it seems. So I'll see you guys next time. And like I said, if there are any other myths that you know about, or misconceptions, in other words, yeah, they're misconceptions. If there are any others you could think of, leave them in the comments below because I would love to know as well. Alright, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!